Hello, everybody. Welcome to Northern Disclosure with Rob Morrow and Janine Turner. That's me. I am Janine Turner. Well, welcome to the show. This is our Watch podcast based off Northern Exposure. It's our 10th episode, but this is season 2, episode 2, and it's entitled The Big Kiss. And it was written by Henry Brommel. God bless him. He's passed, but he was an extraordinary writer, and directed by Sandy Smollett, right, Rob?
That's right.
Right, I got that. Okay, good. I knew Sandy. I just was making sure. It's only been 35 years. So we're thrilled that you're with us today. We're going to have a great time. Rob and I are going to reminisce about the Big Kiss and all of our memories. Very spiritual show, very funny show. But then also we are going to read your comments and read some of your questions. So this is what this episode is going to be. So when you comment for us, know that we're going to be looking at them. And if you ever have any questions, you can actually type out a question. We are filming a little bit ahead, so you might have to wait a few weeks to hear it, but know that it'll eventually get there. So if you have any questions or comments, we know we love your comments, by the way, but also you can start asking some questions. So good day, Rob.
Good day, Janine. It's good to see you, and nice to be back here. I loved watching The Big Kiss. It was, I think, it's interesting. I think it was one of the first episodes of Joel not being in the A story, really. He wasn't the A B. He was kind of the C in a way. And I remember when I read the script thinking, "Oh my God, I got a day off this week" or something like that, because I was crazed. But I think I was just reading some audience, some fan comments and questions, and a couple people said they'd love a synopsis of the episode. As we roll into it. So you want to speak a little bit about the show about this particular episode?
Yeah, but that's a little tricky. I think it's a lot more fun just to sort of go stream of consciousness but basically what happens in the synopsis is that Ed is looking for his parents. He's adopted and he's never met his parents. So his guardian angel spirit, so to speak, arrives to help him go on a journey to help him find his parents. It's kind of sort of like, what's the Jimmy Stewart movie, which I can never remember the title for some reason. It's A Wonderful Life. Yes, it's Wonderful Life. A little bit like A Wonderful Life.
Why is that? I have a hard time remembering that title too.
I know.
It's the greatest movie ever. I watch it once a year, and yet whenever I pop, I'm like, wait, what is it? What is that?
So you know what? It also happens to me with the Debbie Reynolds Singing in the Rain.
That one
Singing in the Rain. I'm always like, what is it? But It's a Wonderful Life. So the spirit guide comes. Ed can see him, but nobody else can see him. But of course, Elaine can see him. So Marilyn can see him. Really wonderful. We'll get down into the byproducts of that and the Hollings bar and eat, whether he can eat or not, and whether he can sleep or not. But really beautiful spiritual. And they go to the water and to the wind, and they try to find. The other storyline is the Big Kiss. A beautiful woman steps into Chris in the morning's radio station and asks for directions, and he's so taken with her that he loses his voice, which is a horrible thing for someone who is a radio DJ. And there's that entire storyline, and the only way to get it back is to kiss the most beautiful woman in town, and which, I'm not saying I was, but they all decide it was Maggie O'Connell. And so I want to talk about that with you, Rob, because some of your expressions and things, it was really fun. But it was also wonderful. I had the chance to work with John Corbett a lot. And the other storyline was Cynthia Gary kind of popped in as one of the beautiful women because there was this theme of beautiful women with Maurice. So I think that was...
I think that covers it pretty well. First we should say that Floyd Red Crow Westerman played One Who Waits, and he was great. Mm-hmm. And that story is fascinating. Again, it speaks to the spirituality and the metaphysics that were, a regular theme in the show. Something I find interesting is the way they said that Ed was the only one who could see One Who Waits because the white people think of him as being dead. And in the Native American culture, there's no, there's a continuum. And so if you're native, in theory, you could see him, which I just thought was an interesting notion
Mhm.
to put out
It
there.
is.
I
Yep.
also want to point out that I got a text and an email from Josh this morning saying that he never used the phrase benevolent universe. We've been talking a lot about that. I don't know where I picked it up because someone said it. Called that one of the distinguishing features of Northern Exposure was that it was a benevolent universe. But Josh very pointedly wanted to clarify. Josh Brand, who's one of the co-creators of the show, he
Brilliant.
never said that. He finds that too sappy a notion. It's what he said was that it was a non-judgmental universe, and the universe had no dog in the game, so to speak. It doesn't take a position either way, which is a completely different idea. I think both you and I respond to the notion of a benevolent universe, and I could see where their quote philosophical materialists out there might disagree with that notion. Josh thinks maybe David Chase, who went on to write The Sopranos
I
and
do
wrote the
not see that
last.
quote coming from David Chase.
Well, he said it in a way that wasn't nice. He said it as a dismissive way. Um, and so anyway, I think it's worth kind of putting that into our lexicon because we've been saying it now for a while, and we've been doing interviews, and but non-judgmental is pretty great too.
We won't give credit to Josh anymore for that. Well, look, if you I love philosophy. I read this book, Socrates to Sartre, and I think you love philosophy, and I love metaphysics, and I'm a very spiritual person. So we see things through that lens. I guess he would be another sort of a philosopher that wasn't going to touch into those sort of metaphysical spiritual worlds, but I think you can bring to it whatever you want to bring to it, and everyone's going to watch it for the reasons they want to watch it. And I don't think you can get away. That's pretty ironic, really, because I don't think you can get away with the sort of with it doesn't matter what religion you are, freedom of religion, pick your own religion, but there's such a love and spirituality to it. And the Native American that you were talking about that you couldn't see because they believed life is continuous. But also, another way to look at that, if we're going to be philosophical, is that it was his angel. Now, of course, you have to say, why was Marilyn able to see him? But still,
Well,
it's
we spoke about that because in as the premise in the show is that Native Americans can see because they believe that the spirit is a
yeah, but I
continuum.
think a lot of us believe that. Like I believe that, right? I believe that my father's spirit is here, and I not in a hokey way, right? I believe in the afterlife. I believe that my
Right, but
guardian
in the
angels are
show, but
here,
that's
my heavenly
Janine.
host. No, no, no. But I'm saying other people. Well, Maggie O'Connell could have thought that, right? I think that she could have thought
She could
life
have,
was
but she didn't see
continuous.
him, right?
Okay, that's really not the point I'm making, though. The point I'm making is that it can be it could be the Native American thing, of course. I'm also just saying that it was kind of his spiritual heavenly host that was with him, that was helping him. And so we can all look at it from our own perspectives. I don't think we should get bogged down in it, really. But I think that it was wonderful the way he took him from play. Well, do you want to say something else about it? I just don't know. I don't know what else to say. I agree with what you're saying, which is that people can only see it because they believe that life is continuous and that life is, yes, but I believe other people than Native Americans believe that. So we need to maybe think of another reason why only the two of them saw it, because I believe that my guardian angels are here, but that doesn't mean I can see them. But some people do see them. I've heard people say they've watched their mother after they come into their room. So I don't know that it's just a Native American thing as far as being able to see it. But you look like you wanted to continue the discussion, and I don't want to shut you down. So what else? I mean, what else would you like to say about it?
No, I don't. I don't have any more to say about it. I think we should also clarify today that we're not going to have a guest. Periodically, we're going to do episodes without a guest, so that we can kind of look at the comments and talk and address some questions that might be raised. We're going to try to streamline the process where we get the questions and have a bunch of them lined up. And we did get a couple requests for fans to come on the show. and we're going to try to accommodate that at some point. We have to figure out how to do it, but initially we're going to first go through the cast as guests, and then some of the key writers and producers and directors and some of the personnel that worked on the show before we get to that. But we will get to it. Just to come back to what we were talking about, just to dovetail out of it. Uh, One Who Waits says white people can be blind, which I
Mm.
think is, I think to your point, Janine, it can be a generalization. Obviously, there's white people that are spiritual and see and believe in in the notion of the spirit as a continuum and all that. But I think in a general sense, and as it's depicted in the episode, um, white people can be blind, and to us, he's dead, is what he says, which I think is, it's just an interesting. It's what the show was about. It was trying to kind of talk about something that is of the native culture that's not in general, Caucasian culture, really.
Yes, and I honor the Native American culture, and I loved anything to do with it, and the actual. I loved the episode, and that they had that wonderful moment of enlightenment and crossing the line of our perspective here and going into a different realm. I That's what I love more than anything in the world. So I think it was fabulous.
And I think we should say that Henry Brumell, who was just he passed away. Was a great writer, wrote many episodes of the show. He passed away around 2012 or something like that, I think. But he went on to write on Homeland, and he was a writer on Homicide and Carnival and Chicago Hope, and was just such a great, really smart, interesting writer. And I always remember the few. I think, because as we've talked about, Janine and I, we were in Seattle. And the producers and the writers were in L.A., and so we weren't day to day with them. But when we got to spend some time with them, it was always interesting to get their perspective. And Henry was a super smart and talented writer.
But so many of them got their starts with us, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Henry had been around a while, and also Sandy Smolin directed 3 episodes for us. Right, he did Sex, Lies, and Ed's Tapes, and then and he did this, The Big Kiss, and then he has one coming up in season 3. And so, we talk about sometimes how hard it is to have directors coming and going on episodic TV. But so when you get one that you're familiar with, you remember that feeling of like one of the directors that showed up for a second or third or fourth or fifth episode. Bill D'Elia directed 5. You as soon as you see them on day 1, you're like, okay, I can relax. I know this
Mhm.
person is going to. We understand each other. We have a shorthand already, and I felt that originally with Sandy from the get go. I remember having a great connection with him, and so when he showed up again on this episode, it was. And he did such a good job. I think it's really lovely. It's really well directed, don't you think?
Yes. And also, I think that back to that whole spiritual quality, there was also a spirituality in regard to the whole kind of metaphysics, this seems to be the word of the day, um, of John Corbett, Chris in the Morning, losing his voice to this beautiful woman. I mean, that has the same sort of. Could that really happen? I mean, would that really happen? It really sort of went. There was a suspension of logical belief, and I think we could say that Josh was very logical, which is ironic for having done such a beautifully philosophical show. But there was a suspense. And also, they used to say on the show, or they say this in the biz, creative license. So you can have creative license, but also the same sort of spiritual quality that the Native Americans were having, the white folk were having it too, because you've got John Corbett there losing his voice, and everyone's coming to him and saying, well, you can lose your voice because, you even say, well, don't you? That you can lose. No, I don't know that you do. You can come back to that. But just, you can lose your voice. Oh, you can lose your voice because you saw a beautiful woman. If you were to take that to a doctor, they'd be like, absolutely not, which Fleischman was like, oh, you're kidding me. That can't possibly happen. But that was their belief. And Maggie believed it, and Chris believed it. And so when they got together, she looks at him and says, "Do you believe that, this kiss will give you your voice back?" And even that is really interesting, right? Because in faith, whether you're Native American and you see that person, whether you're a, white person and you believe that the kiss is going to give it back to you, that's all kind of that's a whole nother spiritual realm. That's not in this dimension. It's just a belief within your own mind. And I think all religions are like that. You have to have a suspense of belief in order to get there. And that particular religion, so to speak, was kind of, what would you call it? Like a mysticism that if I kiss you, you're going to get your voice back. And he believed it, so he did. So that's another whole suspension of reality that sort of threaded through the whole show.
Yeah, Maurice talks about the Arthurian legends, and references those as a, kind of a myth of the kiss. But isn't it more than a kiss? Aren't they suggesting that? Don't they suggest that he has to sleep with
Well, but
someone?
see, there you go. Your suspense and belief, since it's not factual, like out of a scientific lab with a theory, right? You can then change that to whatever you want it to be. And
No, I'm
so
saying in the show, isn't it?
in
Isn't
the
it?
show, but she did not sleep with him. She stands up and she says, "I can't do this. I'm not going to do this." But she looks at him and says, "Do you believe?" I think she's like, "Well, do you believe that this kiss will do it?" And so they changed it.
Right, which I guess hence the title, The Big Kiss.
Right. But they changed what they played a variant on that belief, which is, why don't we just say the kiss does it, right? And that's the power of the mind. I think that's the power of positive thinking, the power of, they say all the greats like Leonardo da Vinci and Puccini and all that they had this ability to think positively, and because what you think is what you are and what you think is what you believe. So, you could go further on this like forever and ever and ever, but was One Who Waits really even there? So, that's just, it's a suspension of reality that's really pretty interesting, that I think had the thread through the whole show. And we've talked about that a lot of these storylines thread through all the A, B, and C storylines. And I have to say, it was a lot of fun to work with John Corbett in those episodes. It was a lot of fun for you and I to have kind of this trilogy of someone else, there being a potentiality of Maggie being having an affair with Chris, and your
Right,
face
because you see how jealous Joel is, which is interesting because it's the
Well, I was going to
beginning of
say, your
something.
face at the end, I thought that was classic when everybody arrives and everybody's watching at the very end, and you're there with your hands in your pockets, and you did it so beautifully, Rob. You acted it so well. And what was your line? Your line was like, what did you say? Is this a competitive Olympic sport? Do you remember that?
Something
Like,
like that. Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
like, what is this? Kind of Olympic sport, and it was fun to watch your face. You did it so well with that element of jealousy and the innocence of John Corbett and Chris in the Morning, just wanting that voice back. But the way he handed the cards off, he had those cards already. Like, here's the card, here's the card, here's the card, here's the card. It was pretty delightful. And then at the end, when you come in and ask, does she moan? It's kind of like, and then John Corbett has that look on his face, Chris, like, I don't know, he goes silent again, which is interesting. He's silent. He's
Well,
not
that's
going.
funny that I say, because you say, I mean, that would be more than a kiss if you were moaning, which is interesting.
You think we did. Nobody
Right.
knows outside that room. That's that great country western song. No one knows what goes on behind closed doors. Did you know that
Yeah.
song, Rob? Do you know that
Yeah, I've
song?
heard that. I do know that song.
And so no one knows what goes on behind closed doors. They knew that they didn't, but you thought they did.
I love how I love when Chris kind of broaches is kind of thinking that you're going to be the candidate for him, that the way he kind of comes on to you is says, "Where's Rick?" It's so
She's like, "Where's
funny.
Rick?" I like that scene between the two of us, and when I'm playing with the bottle, like peeling off the label from my beer
Yeah,
bottle.
that's a nice scene.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's because
That
it's
must have
like
been an ad
there's.
lib. I don't that we must have actually finally actually maybe most bravely ad libbed something, because I don't think peeling the label off the beer bottle was in the script.
I think it probably was, but
I don't think so.
but it was a sweet scene because it's It's funny. I keep thinking about something Corbett said about how we kind of look alike, and looked alike then. And, there was something in that scene that we're like two sides of the same coin, our characters. And we're sitting there in the bar, and it's just a casual hangout, right? Like there's no real pretext for us being there. It's not like I came to you or you came to me. We just happen to be hanging out, which is again is probably an evolution in the relationship, right? It's just there's no reason for us to have to be together. We're just our time is chosen to be hanging out, and we're having a kind of a friendly chat. And I'm kind of giving you a hard time. And
It
there's
was
something.
fun.
It
It
was.
was
It was.
it
Yeah.
was a
There was
it was a
something
fun
charming
scene to
about it.
watch us just kind of have a dialogue with so much going on in our own brains that we weren't revealing.
Do you know what
Um,
I want to point out? Like that I've been meaning to say now for having rewatched the shows. The whole log truck motif.
oh, right. That's
Right,
right.
because
Mhm.
like, so when we were shooting, almost every episode, they would pay a log. There were a lot of logging companies around where we were shooting, and so they would pay a logging company to allow a driver to drive through a shot with a big long flatbed with long timber,
Mhm.
strapped onto it, and they would always use it to kind of get into scenes. And I remember so distinctly when I watched those moments of like, we have to wait for the truck to circle because it was a big truck and it had to go all the way around town
Mhm.
to do
Mhm.
another take, and they'd get it driving by, and every director would come in and want to use that, and every director would think they were doing something special, and we would roll our eyes because we're like, yeah, we do that every show.
And it was the days before drones, so you had to have a crane if you wanted a big, shot in the air, and that was always the last shot of the day because it was a big, or the first one, it was a big ordeal. But the dogs, the animals that ran across the road with you or me, and then the orchestration of the townsfolk, walking up and down, the movement, the other people on the street, that was all, well, that's all orchestrated. None of
It's
that. There
all,
weren't.
and it was really, we had great ADs. And I should say that Ann Gordon, who was our animal
Mhm.
wrangler trainer, reached out to me.
Oh, good.
And
Hi, Ann.
she wants to come on the show. And I
Good,
said
she
we'd get her
should.
on. She was great. We had a lot of creatures and animals coming on that
Mhm.
show that we had to deal with, that had to be, we had a bear, and
She
we
did so
had,
well. Yeah, and then
yeah,
I
she was
danced with,
always
I had a
great.
dog that came back as Rick. There's another suspension of reality, right? Now,
What,
there you go. Maggie thought her dog came back as Rick, who was dead. So there's a white person, by the way, suspending belief that her dog is sitting in the chair next to her. And not only that, well, that it's Rick. That dog, what was her dog was Rick. The dog was there, but she thought the dog was Rick. So there's a spiritual suspension of reality.
for sure. I don't disagree that other ethnicities have spirituality. I'm just saying that within the context of the show, that was
Yes,
what they were
it
floating
was beautiful.
in
And
this
then
particular
anytime we can,
episode.
yeah. Well,
Because I think there's a lot of moments um, where all the characters have moments of kind of transcendence. Where
that's the
they
word.
are hooked into something
What
beyond.
does Fleischman have that's transcendental? Is that a word? Transcendental.
What does he
That's a good
have?
word. Tran you're I'm trying to get some examples of when you transcend.
Well, his whole journey is that. I mean, over the whole course of the arc of the series, he becomes much more enlightened, much more open. He experiences things. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves in terms of what goes on at the end, but one could argue, in terms of Joel's journey, that it is a spiritual journey, that it is a kind of an arc, an opening to other than what is before our eyes, and he goes kicking and screaming because he is, you know at the beginning, a very, hard and true, materialist who doesn't, think anything. I mean, even his whole way he deals with Chris in this episode and his losing his voice, it's very pragmatic. He talks about it in medical terms, not in anything mystical about it. And he's always learning those lessons throughout the series.
Yeah, so true. Well said. And I think that I was thinking about Maggie, and she's a little bit of both, I guess, because in this episode she's that sort of no nonsense girl, but she was willing to go along with this alternate universe mentality that a kiss could give him his voice back. So that's pretty interesting. I think that's a duality within her character, which is pretty cool to reveal.
Absolutely. And I think, again, speaking to that, One Who Waits says of Joel that he thinks too much, which is from a kind of an Eastern philosophical perspective, it's the thing that gets in our way is our thinking. It's what, like, if you meditate, you're supposed to not think. You're supposed to let your thoughts go, and in that you can see other realities, so to speak. But I think it's interesting that One Who Waits says that, and
I love those scenes, and he's a wonderful actor, and he and Darren were really Darren. I would say Ed's innocence through the whole show is just beautiful. He's just so
yeah,
innocent, and he just is like he never, gosh, he doesn't bicker. He's just this young innocent. He portrayed it so well. And then when he didn't, but then the look on his face when he didn't get to find his parents, you could see that hurt bubbling underneath. It was just a marvelous display of acting, I believe. But of course, the most beautiful moment in the whole thing, as far as I'm concerned, and this is all a whole nother spiritual aspect, in my opinion, it was this divine coincidence when the car, he stops, a man, is fixing his tire. He says, "Can I help you?" He looks just like Ed. And he puts out his hand and shakes his hand and said his last name was Smith, and that he lived down the road 17 miles. And of course, that was his last name, Smith. So that was his father, is the way it was. And he gets in the truck and he goes that direction. I mean, I love stuff like that.
yeah, it was touching. His whole journey is to find out, who his father was. And it's interesting at one point that One Who Waits says that he had many fathers, which
That
I think,
too.
again,
Yeah.
is the kind of, that's the spiritual sense, and then his literal father, in theory, shows up. And if correct me if I'm wrong, but that actor, I can't remember his name. Do you remember his name?
That played Ed's father.
Yeah,
I
because
don't.
he comes back, right?
I don't remember that. I
I
don't
think he
know.
does. Yeah, I think he
Does
comes
he?
back in subsequent episodes.
How
Yeah.
funny.
Um,
I really don't remember. But that was a. I believe those type of things happen. I believe we step into situations where there's someone put in our path to speak to us or reveal to us, and we just have to be spiritually open to recognizing it when it happens, and
for
that's
sure.
probably the theme of the show. Well, do you want to go through some of these questions?
Well, how
And
about we get to some of the lines, for some of our favorite lines? I'm sure you have some.
you mean in the show?
Yeah.
I actually didn't write any down this week.
Oh, well, I got a couple.
I
I
mean,
love when you,
I did love that line where you said, "Is this what is this, an Olympic sport?" I thought
right.
that was a funny line.
I like where you say, I don't know if this is real. They say, like, where you been? And you say, I just flew in from Yak Attack. I had to fly to Yak Attack. Like, is that real? Or is it just clever, funny puns?
Right.
Um, uh, I love your line. Let me tell you something, Fleischman. I'm not some flat-chested junior league gross point wimp. That's a great
That's
line.
a good line.
Um, I loved how the whole town shows up. And it's just such a funny. It's just so out there that that Chris has lost his voice, that the remedy to curing it is that he has to kiss or sleep with a beautiful girl, and that the whole town is invested on one hand because he's their DJ and they need, that's a thing we didn't talk about. John Cullum trying to talk on the
Oh, it was great.
on
Yeah.
K-Bear is
Mhm.
funny. And because Chris needs a replacement while he loses his voice, he needs someone to
Mhm.
come in and do the DJing. But the whole town shows up as a spectator, as I said, like an Olympic sport, to kind of witness this event, which is just out there.
Well, but
It's
that's a whole nother transcendent, metaphysical, spiritual perspective that they were all willing to take. The whole town. The whole town believed that, well, the people that showed up at least, that if he slept with Maggie or, had the kiss or whatever, that he was going to get his voice back. Or maybe they just wanted to go and see if it was going to happen. But then but they wouldn't even go to see if it was going to happen if they just thought, oh, this can't possibly work. So that's the suspension of reality that everybody in this show had in one way or another.
right. But the practical side too was they were invested in him because they wanted a DJ.
Yeah,
So it wasn't
sure.
just, there was different
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah. But they also liked him probably too and wanted him to get his voice back. They were behind him. They were rallying for him. But they also thought it was pretty cool, this sort of mysticism. There's another word, but it's
So the man who played Ed's father is Eloy Casados.
mhm.
And I think
He
he
was
came
terrific.
back. And that's such a touching moment, as you were talking about at the end, the way the connection and Ed's realization after the fact that he may have just that the universe conspired to have him meet his father in
Mhm.
all
Oh,
places on
yeah.
this road in the
No
middle of
doubt. No
Alaska.
doubt. And so, what's interesting is we also have to the byline in my musicals, don't give up for the miracle, because that's been the kind of the theme of my life is I've
Your
just erased
musical? What's your
my
musical?
my musical is entitled Belva,
Belva. Huh?
about Belva Lockwood, who was a single mother in 1850, but
Uh-huh.
because her husband died, but she was the first woman admitted to the bar of the United States Supreme Court after fighting for it for
Uh-huh.
5 years, and first woman to run for president on the ballot in 1884.
Uh-huh.
But we could even correlate this to our stories of getting the northern exposure. I thought this other job was the job for me, and I didn't get it. But God knew that there was a better job, northern exposure, right around the corner, and I just had to not give up before that miracle. And I think it's the same thing Ed thought. One Who Waits and One Who Waits thought it too, that was going to be the answer, and it wasn't. But God didn't take him that far to drop him, so to speak. And don't give up for the miracle, because the spiritual, whatever you want to call it, forces of the other dimensions looked and said, we're not going to drop you. It's just not going to happen this way. We're going to have you actually meet and see your father. So, I mean, that's it. I love that kind of stuff. Whatever you want to call it. And I'm sorry, Josh, I think that might be a benevolent universe.
Well, Josh's point was not that there's not benevolence
But
in
he
the
didn't say it.
universe.
Yeah.
No, it's not that there's not benevolence in the universe. It's that that there's the universe doesn't have any dog in the game, any skin in the game. It if it happens to be that there's benevolence, it's not the universe doing it. It's just quirks of
Yeah,
existence or
I
something.
don't believe that at all. That's just
Right, I
not what
know.
I
Well,
believe.
I know
Other
that
people
we're
can
not.
believe that.
I'm
I
talking
just
about
don't
what
believe that.
Josh
Yeah,
believes, though, and
I
it's
see. I
interesting.
see.
I
But
think
that's
it's
an interesting
interesting.
take to have written this show that was so incredibly in all other universes and so spiritual. That's really
Well,
fascinating to me.
I think it just opens up different interpretations for what we've been talking about. I mean, I think we might have a certain spiritual belief that he doesn't have. Um,
Well, but look, can we talk about that for a second? If it's not other dimension, how did that father just show up?
it's not a question of that there's other dimensions. It's a question of whether those dimensions are acting to have some positive result.
But if they're not, why would that coincidence? And we're just talking philosophically here. I'm not arguing. But I mean, how would who makes that happen then?
Well,
Who gets that
that's the
father there to
question.
cross?
There's in his mind there's no who, and I would probably side with him on that.
Well, so then how did that happen?
Well, you tell me. I mean, that's
Well,
the
that
thing. It's
I
like
just
if
don't
there's a
think humans
mystery.
do that. It
Well,
obviously
yeah, but
wasn't
the point is not whether there's mystery. The point is whether there's an intent on the universe trying to make some positive outcome.
I think there was an intent to make a positive outcome.
Okay,
That's
well,
what I
that's
think,
your right.
but that's my
Yeah,
opinion. Yeah, and
absolutely. And I should just point out that once the music, and a lot of this was
oh, I
Martin
was gonna talk about
Bruce.
that. Yeah.
There's so many great songs. There's the Beyond the Sea, the French version, La Mer. The Charles Trenet song. I know I don't know it in French, but it's somewhere beyond the sea. It's so touching. It's the way
Mhm.
they use it. The Nat King Cole song. When I grow old, I hope I don't.
That was the last song. I noticed that. Wasn't that the last song in his truck? And so he said, "This one's for you, Maggie," and he plays that. Was that the one? Was that the song there, Rob?
I think so. Yeah. And it
And
was
what
just
I
so.
noticed is the truck pulls up and you're hearing that song. He opens the door and the music stops, right?
Right.
He has his scene with his supposed potentiality of, his father. And then he gets back in the truck, closes the door, and the music starts again. Did you notice
Yeah.
that?
I
Yeah.
did notice it was very sweet.
Mhm.
They were really good about the way they sourced music a lot, that it
Mhm.
was
Oh,
coming from
excellent.
somewhere. It would then expand into a kind of meta sense, but it would have initially come from a radio or a car radio or the radio at the brick or something. It was
And we
always
have to
fun.
thank
Those
all
little,
these people behind the scenes that I was thinking about the expense of maybe getting a Nat King Cole song or the expense. And thank you to the executives, right? That thought of it. Martin Bruce Lee, we talk about a lot, and Josh, who was always such a brilliant orchestrator of everything, but also, the executives that said, "Yeah, you can have the money. All right," or the money was used well. I don't know. There were just a lot of behind the scenes decisions because we went through all this music stuff trying to get the show streamed, and so someone had to make that decision to pay that kind of money for the music instead of saying, "No,
uh,
just write something."
absolutely.
We thank whoever you were. Okay, Rob, I have the first question for you. It's for
Okay.
you. You ready? This is from Kaja Kosnova,
Hmm.
and she is a fabulous, or it's Kaja Koshnocha. I want to get that right, Kasha. Kaja Koshnocha. And she is on social media, and she's a fabulous artist. And I happen to have 3 of her beautiful paintings, which someday I'm going to put online in my house. I'm looking at one right now of my Longhorn, and I have 2 in the other room. So, but here is Kasha's question. Hello, Kasha. She said, "My question, Rob. Rob once said in an interview that he remembers that many times his character merged with himself. So that boundary between actor and character almost disappeared, like during a very emotional last scene where he really cried as himself and as the character. I guess that's before you leave. I would like to ask if you also remember such moments when your character merged so closely with you. And can you and Rob tell us more about such magical moments?" So she's specifically here asking about the last scene between the 2 of us, which I barely remember. We'll have to go back and watch.
I don't want to get ahead of us in terms of really going
That's
into
true, but
detail.
I think she's
Right.
asking a general question, is the merge of your emotional life with the character's life. A lot of times we talk about, "Oh, we're different. I don't know how to chop wood. I don't know how to do this." But I think she's asking a really cool question about these magical moments when our emotions merge with the characters. So talk about it from all these merges that happen for you emotionally.
The whole way that I approach the work is to use my own experience. That's the kind of approach of modern acting is to take experiences from my life and merge them with the imaginary circumstances of the scene. And so almost every episode there would be moments where I could be speaking from Rob or Joel. For instance, you know, I was like Joel. I was transplanted from New York, in Joel's case to Alaska, in my case to Seattle, and so if I were talking about missing home, and so all my friends and dear ones were back east, as were Joel's, and so if I were talking about that, it would be very easy for me to be imagining talking about my friends and loved ones, my family back east, and so those feelings were genuine. The other thing is like, if I'm outside and it's freezing and we're shooting in a freezing location, those are genuine feelings. I'm actually freezing, and if I lament the fact that I'm in this frozen tundra, as Joel would put it, you know, I could be, if I were tired on that particular day of shooting and it was a long day and I was out in the middle of nowhere freezing, I could very easily tap into, what am I doing here? Why am I out in this middle of this frozen landscape, freezing? Every episode had moments, for sure. And I think in terms of the last scene, we'll get to that when we there's great stuff there we'll talk about when we get to that, but we're going kind of chronologically in terms of
Sure.
dealing with episodes.
Well, to build off what you're saying, this is a little bit of a tidbit behind the scenes as actors, right? Is you and I might have had, and someone put a clip together of all of our like kisses, which was really kind of fun. It was like, oh my gosh, a little embarrassing actually. But we might have had a romantic scene together that day, but we might have also been really irritated with each other personally. You know what I mean? It might have been like, and then action, we suddenly have to like pull it out and transform. So sometimes I think there is a calling on your acting technique, but we also had that bond that was always just there, and that kind of chemistry that was always just there. So it was there no matter whether we'd had we never really argued much at all anyway. I'm just giving an example. But that's part of the acting, is sometimes we pull our own emotions. Sometimes we have to do it because we're not getting it from the other actor too. And I'm not, this isn't about you at all, but I've been in situations. The one thing I loved working with you, Rob, because of your level of passion for your work, and your generosity as an actor. And the camaraderie and the collaboration, and that we looked out for each other. That was a beautiful thing. And I got spoiled by that. And so then you go out into the other world, to another world, and working on another project, and they just don't care about the work, and they're showing up, or you're supposed to be really attracted to them and you're not at all. I mean, that's when you have to make your own choices to say, okay, I'm going to see this, I'm going to imbue this on this person. And like you say, you have to recall someone from your hometown, someone from your life, or something to actually make that happen. So it's just an interesting web, isn't it, of how we kind of pull it together?
Absolutely. So, one of the questions that keeps popping up in my feed is, will we have John Cullum on the show?
Oh.
And John is, we had him set. John is 95, and it's just a little impractical for him to come on the show. But we really wanted him, and we wish him the best. And we both loved him dearly. We love him dearly. And so it doesn't look like we're going to get John on.
Yeah, right now it doesn't seem like the right time for him. 95.
Right.
I mean, he's 95.
John Cullum about a decade ago, so that would put him around 85, maybe 15 years. I was in New York. John Cullum was on Broadway. He's in his 80s, doing 2 Broadway shows at the same time. Literally, he's in one show. It was like on 44th Street, I think. And he's in one show for the first act, right? Then at intermission, he crosses the street, goes in the other theater, and it does the character in the second. The man is doing 2 Broadway shows at the same time. He was
I didn't know that.
indefatigable. Yeah.
He was in 1776, the musical, and he was absolutely mesmerizing. And then, as I think I mentioned, I worked with him before Northern Exposure on Quantum Leap. We were in
That's
Man on
right.
the March together, and I always had a reverence for John Cullum. And
What do
I
you
used
mean,
to
Man
think
of La Mancha?
it was like Quantum Leap. It was sort of the making of that play. Like we were actors in the play. And so
Oh,
he
I
was
see. I
singing,
see.
and I portrayed
Oh,
a
I get it.
character in the Quantum Leap, right?
Uh-huh.
That's also perhaps applicable to today's show. Everything we're kind of talking about is a quantum leap. If you want to get into metaphysics, the atoms that split and they do the same thing no matter where they go. But we digress. But I revere John Cullum, and I used to walk up to him and say things like, "Would you recite this poem for me?" Because I would just want to hear him recite it.
I always remember the way it always I used to make fun of you, and it just came out. The way you say poem. It's not, and it's not, it may not. I say poem.
I say poem.
I know, but it's funny to me. I say
What do you
poem.
say? Poem.
You say poem.
Well, I'm from Texas.
All right, I'm not just saying. I just it just
Try to
brings
do
back
everything out.
memories of because Janine is a poet. She actually writes poetry, so we would talk about poetry fairly often. And I think at first, when you first started to say, I didn't know what you were talking about. I was like, what is she saying? And then I realized that that was your way of saying
We
poem.
say things. We have a lot of sayings down here in Texas, like "You're just going to get upset every little whip stitch, aren't you?" It wasn't until I got a text that someone said, "What's a whip stitch?" It was a
So
stitch.
I
So
think I wouldn't mind reading a couple because I'm not coming up with many questions, but some of the comments are interesting, and there is a general theme that we talk about of how the show has affected so many people. This is from we don't have the name, but this is their handle on on YouTube. This is Turtle Kitty 357. Thanks so much for this show. It meant more to me than you know. I was relatively young, but not only was I embarking on a whole new different path, but I was actually living in a very funky, unique, and different life path at the time, but living in a small community of equally eccentric souls in the foothills of Montana. I went from city life to rural life, but it was eye-opening experience. Then I had a show that often reflected my experiences, so I loved it. It was also comforting too. It's interesting, you know, that it's that a show, so much television can be anchoring for us if we see ourselves in the characters, and a lot of there were so many different kinds of characters on Northern Exposure that a lot of people could see themselves in the journey. I'm always amazed at when people come up to me, who their favorite character is, or who they hated. It's always interesting.
this is from Sky Tenniel. Sky Tenniel. Um, Love that you're doing this. Thank you. If I want or need to feel uplifted, I can always go to Sicily. It's no exaggeration that it's affected my life positively over all these years. In fact, I'll soon reside on a small Caribbean isle, south to the future, he says, haha,
Uh-huh.
which reminds me a lot of Northern Exposure and Sicily. Rob and Janine, please keep going with these awesome talks. Much love. So that's great. Thank you for that. And also that fits into what you just read, Rob. He's now going to go to his own small town that the show affected him for years. So that's cool. Positively affected, uplifted. We talk about that, don't we, Rob? The
Yeah,
show's just
absolutely.
uplifting for people. So thank you for that one. This is from Matthew Faraci. Matthew Faraci. This podcast delivers on every level. If you're a fan of the like capital letter, greatest TV show ever made, you'll get lost in how brilliantly Janine Turner and official Rob Morrow navigate the ins and outs of making of the series. As an executive producer, I can also assure you that this podcast satisfies even at the deeper level of production and storytelling. Bravo. There, that's
Cool.
nice. Thank you,
Here's
Matthew.
one. How does one get the original series with the original soundtrack? Now, the one that's playing on Amazon Prime now, which is streaming, has most of the original music, so you can get it there for sure.
Yeah, I'm surprised how much of the original music really is. I mean, we talked about that a lot when I worked with Universal to get this stream. That was the major contention, and actually, they have a lot of the same songs.
And what happened with the music rights? Because he also says, could you guys also address what happened with the music rights? The back in the when we did the show, um, there wasn't this sense of eternity with television shows. They had a kind of a shelf life, and so they would make these deals that would be short term. So they would make the music rights deals. I think tended to be around 5 years, and when those rights expired, there was so much needle drop music in Northern Exposure that was really expensive. Nat King Cole, the French song "La Mer," all these songs were super costly. So that when it came time to to syndicate the shows in subsequent years, the rights for the music were gone, and so the studio would have to pay a fortune to get the rights. But somehow enough time went by, and they were able to make some kind of deals so that they could get the rights again, or they were willing to pay money. I don't know which it was, but the thing that's interesting is now, if you get a license for a song, you get it in perpetuity, so because these shows go on forever. I mean, here we are 30 years later, and Northern Exposure is streaming.
And also, this was as I said, I talked to them a lot about this. This was also it's different now. I kind of to build off what you said, Rob. It's many different forums. It's not just television anymore. It's going to go and stream and be all over, all in all kinds of places. And I think they just started to work out certain situations where everybody would be to pay the same. But it was a big undertaking for our executives. We want to thank them very much, because they had to call each and every one. I mean, it's a big deal when you have to reach out to relicense all the music. And I was working with them for 3 years on this, and I just kept calling. And at one point they said, no, we decided we're not going to do it. And it came to me third person. So I called back and said, what is this I hear, that you're not going to do this? And they're like, oh, okay, here we go again. And they got it back on the wagon. But the music, it was really difficult to have to call all the licensing. And I think they finally figured out a way to do that. What I said to them, though, is the music was a star in the show. And all the intricacies of every choice of music meant something to our producers. But also, it's not all there was to the show. And that's what I would say. It's like, are we going to lose the show and not have it out there for, all kinds of people to see again, rising generations to be able to enjoy it, have a legacy for it, because of maybe a song or two that's missing? And also, it was great scenery, it was great writing, it was great acting, it was great costumes, it was great storytelling. So are we going to throw it all out with the baby with the bathwater for a couple of songs? So I think finally there was some headway made in that area.
So here's one. This is from KY2FL 2015. Most all of the characters were relatable, at least a little. Okay, maybe not Adam and Eve. And the idea of getting away from normal to carve out a unique existence in a little community in Alaska is a dream for a lot of us who yearn for a life full of unique experiences. Plus, Maggie and Joel's chemistry was so damn cute. I do think that's an interesting appeal of the show. I don't know when we were talking about it, is that we were doing an interview yesterday, Janine and I, and we're talking about the idea of Alaska being the last frontier, which I think this person is kind of getting at, and the show spoke to this unique existence where you would have unique experiences. And I think that I know for me, the idea of kind of running away to a town like Sicily is something I think about a lot. Just living somewhere where my experiences weren't necessarily shaped by by grand culture, but more intimate relationships. And so it's nice that person wrote that.
Yes, it is. Here I have one from, okay, how do I say this? Mariposa Blue Sky? Mariposa. Maybe it's Mariposa Blue Sky. Anyway, hope I'm not, how about Mara, or it could be Mariposa Blue Sky. All right. I still marvel at the amazing storytelling this series brought to television and still does. A testament to the great writing, acting, and producing. And I am loving how detailed you both are telling the backstories. Keep it coming. It really was a short story each week, Janine. I totally agree. I want to hear more about every one of them. So,
do you remember any more of the shooting of this particular episode? Like, do you remember anything? I guess you talked about Chris, because those were new scenes for you and John Corbett. Those were those fun to do?
yes, they were fun to do.
Yeah. Do you remember do you remember, and you remember how many houses do you think your character had? Like, I think 3, right?
I know one burned down, and when we
One
were
burned
talking earlier
down.
about what our crew had to do every week, I sit back sometimes and think about they pull you out of your trailer at 2 a.m. and say, "Come on, the house is burning. You got to get there." The house was literally burning. It's like, how did they do that? The things in production that they had to think of. So yeah, one of her house is burned down, and it's always a joy to work with John Corbett. He's just a delight in every way. And when you have a kissing scene, it's always like, is my breath nice? You know what I mean? It's like, do I have a little mint? They used to have Altoids in the camera, like box right underneath the camera. So I remember I cannot see an Altoid to this day and not think about Northern Exposure.
I think they had three different. They kept coming up with different houses for you for some reason. I guess they would lose. Like we would, the town. It's an interesting thing to talk about the town of Roslyn where we shot because when we first started shooting the show up there, they hated that we were there. They didn't want us there. We were a burden to them. We would come in, take over the town, tell them where they could go, when they could go. Once we took over the street, no one could walk down it because we were shooting. And at first, they really wanted us out of there until the show became a hit and it kind of put them on the map. And then their tunes changed. And also, I think Universal started paying more money. But I think what would happen is we would get a location, say Janine's house, Maggie's house, and we would use it for an episode or two. And then the people would say, no, I'm done. I don't want any more. Or you have to pay me so much money that they couldn't afford it. And so we'd have to use different locations. And I just remember looking at that house last night,
Because it was a
and
different,
thinking
yeah.
it was a
Hmm.
different house, right? It was like
Hmm.
we used it a couple times, but then that was the last, and that was early on.
Was that the
Um,
one that burned down though?
I don't think so. No, I think that was another one,
I don't
right?
really remember. We'll have to pay attention. Well, to kind of, and also a lot of people have said North to the Future, so they really love that. Oh, and there's one, Rob, I want to make sure I read. But this is from Ken Schuldman. Schuldman. He says, Northern exposure is the perfect antidote to the times we are living through.
Yeah. Well, we've spoken about that a lot. I got one here saying getting Elaine Miles on would be absolutely amazing.
She's
As
coming.
That's right. We got her coming, and she was. It was great to reminisce with her. So
And hear her stories.
that was from Callum Frame, CALLUMFRAAME.
This is from Jen Clearman. She says, I'm so happy you two are doing this. You can feel the love and respect you both have for each other, the cast, crew, and the story. Thank you. Well, thank you, Jen. Someone said, how often does it drop? I can't find it right now, but of course, every Tuesday a fresh episode will be released, and also someone asked something about wish they were more than once a week. But I kind of think it's great that it's not. Um, I miss when I what's the word we call it when you watch everything at once?
Streaming
Binge,
binge.
binge watch. When we binge watch, it's so you're like, oh, I want to watch the next one, but then it's over. It's sort of like eating a bowl of ice cream and you're loving the ice cream and then it's gone. And you want more, but you can't get more. And the great thing about having an episode released once a week is there was an anticipation. It was a slow savor. I don't really have a show that I look forward to coming home to watch anymore because it's just this kind of binge thing. But during the time, I would hear people on the radio talking about the show that they'd all get together at the office and talk about it around the water cooler because back then the show was a national event at the same time. Everybody watched at the same time on the same night. And so it led kind of to this, like watching a football game. Oh, let's talk about the football game last night.
There are still a lot of shows that drop weekly, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a lot of networks that still do
like
that.
what? Well, network
HBO,
television, but
HBO drops their shows weekly. Netflix drop. A lot of them drop their shows weekly. It's kind of come back into fashion, and
yeah,
it never went
it
out really.
is.
There were but there is
Well, there are a lot of
certain
shows you can
shows where
binge
they
whole seasons at a time.
well once they're aired. You know, they're there. Like I've been binging Breaking Bad, which I never had. And there are shows that do drop the entire thing at once, but mainly it's come back in vogue where
It's good. I'm
they
glad it
drop
has.
them on the
But
weekly.
what is missing though, I think, is when everybody watches the Super Bowl, let's just say the whole nation is sort of watching the Super Bowl, and so afterwards, the next day, everybody's talking about the Super Bowl. Everything is so diluted now. You can go to so many different stations. It's hard to build a star. Actually, I would hate to be a publicist in this day and age. It's hard to actually build a hit show, but you never have that kind of 3 networks only. And then people, not that everybody watched, as many people watched Northern Exposure as watched the Super Bowl, but that, everyone kind of watched it at the same time. And there wasn't that diluted factor. So more people talked about it. And I think that it's not really going to be replicable today. Even if you drop a show on HBO or Paramount Plus, someone might not have Paramount Plus, but everyone had ABC, NBC, and
Yeah, it's a
CBS,
different
CBS.
world for sure. It's fragmented, but it's the world we're in.
But Northern Exposure is a nice antidote to that world. But okay, Rob, we had an interesting show. Josh, we love you. We respect that you don't want to be attributed to Benevolent Universe. We get it. We get everybody's points of view that come to the show and bring their own perspectives, and we certainly have our own. All right. Well, thank you all for listening to this very, probably most eclectic and interesting philosophical show.
You should know that you can listen to the show or you can watch it on the Northern Disclosure YouTube channel, either or. Just so you know, if you want to see us.
Available everywhere. All righty. Well, next week, look, we had a great time today, and we're going to sign off from O'Connell and Fleischman.
Actually, I think it probably should be Fleischman O'Connell.
In your dreams, Fleischman.
Northern Disclosure is a production with Evergreen Podcasts and executive produced by Paul Anderson and Scott McCarthy for Workhouse Media.